Hi, hello, welcome. I would like to share with you my experience at the Clo 3D User Summit in New York 2025. This is my second year going to the summit, and honestly, it does not disappoint. It is such an amazing experience. So the summit is hosted over 2 days. Day one is hosted at the Clo office in the One World Trade Center. This year it was divided into 2 separate floors where workshops were held. And the office is just amazing. I was on the 64th floor this year. And when we first got there, it was foggy, so we didn't get to appreciate the views. But by the end of the day, the sun came out and it was just beautiful. There's these floor to ceiling windows that give you a view of the entire city, and it's just incredible. It's just an incredible space to just experience. And the Clo team themselves are always super inviting and warm and welcoming. There were a few people that told me they saw me on social media, my LinkedIn posts, or listened to my podcast, which is really cool to connect with the community in that way. So day one was all about workshops. 150 people attended day one, and then Clo told me that they had 400 people that attended the main workshop on day two. So day one is a little bit smaller, it's a little bit more intimate, and it's a lot more interactive. So for the workshops on day one, we didn't get to pick our workshops this year. They were assigned to us, and I'm not sure exactly how they got assigned. I think earlier on in the year, we filled out a survey on the types of workshops we would want to attend, and then we were automatically assigned to workshops based on that. I'm not exactly sure how we got assigned workshops, but I think I would have preferred to see the list of workshops and pick which ones I was most interested in. And also we were divided onto 2 separate floors this year, so I didn't get to really see everybody that I wanted to see throughout the whole day. I know, and then I did talk to Clo about this afterwards and let them know that I think a lot of us would have preferred being together on one floor, or at least being able to switch between floors. So my first workshop in the morning was a technical design workflow workshop, and there wasn't a lot of new information for me there, but what I really do enjoy about these workshops is watching somebody else work in Clo. You always see maybe them do something a little bit differently than I typically would do it. And also, the real key to being in these workshops is getting to hear the questions that other people ask. So for example, somebody in the room asked about creating a point of measure for an entire arm side divided by 2, because when you measure that point of measure as a technical designer, the seam lines don't necessarily match up with the halfway point on the garment. So what you need from the 3D garment is the entire measurement of the arm side divided by 2, which is not very easy to do in Clo. So it's just interesting to be in a room with other people having the same problems that you've encountered before. So this applies to the leg line of a panty or the circumference of the waist on a garment, because it doesn't always correspond with the seam lines of the garment. But when you lay it flat and you need to measure it, the physical garment, you need the measurement of halfway. So for example, on the leg line of a panty, the seam line at the side seam or the gusset doesn't necessarily line up with the halfway point on the garment, but you need the total measurement of the whole leg line divided by 2. So that would be nice if we could just see that in our point of measure tab in the object browser in Clo. So for the afternoon workshop, I actually had the privilege of being invited by Clo to teach my workflow for fitting and constructing an underwire bra in Clo 3D. So huge shout out to Milena and Camille and Ariel and Jessica. The Clo team is really amazing. So for my workshop, we had a small group of technical designers from companies like Victoria's Secret and Aerie, which was great because we could have some very specific conversations about the construction and fitting of intimate apparel design, specifically an underwire bra. So a lot of people came up to me afterwards and told me that they were disappointed that they couldn't attend. But I do have an online course. It's called Clo 3D Foundations for Intimate Apparel. And I also plan on making a more advanced course that my goal is to have out by the end of this year. So by around Christmas time this year, that's what I'm going to be focusing on over the next few months. So make sure you stay tuned and keep in contact and watch out for that. Okay, so day 2 of the user summit was held at Brookfield Place, which is right across the street from the Clo office at the One World Trade Center, and is another really beautiful venue. It was catered throughout the day. There were lots of refreshments and food and coffee. The day was broken down into main presentations that were held in the big conference room, and then there were other smaller presentations that you could pick from based on what you were most interested in. So the main conference room had presentations by bigger corporate companies like Hugo Boss and The Gap and Joe Fresh. And then, of course, Clo themselves. Jim Simon gave a presentation and Phoebe Gotta gave a presentation on what's coming up at Clo, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But what I pulled from the general experience was a few key themes that kept popping up. So number 1, your 3D asset doesn't need to be perfect, especially early on in the development process. Adding too many details to the garment just makes the file heavier and harder to work with and harder to modify and make changes to. So the first version or 2 versions of your 3D asset is kind of just an outline, a sketch, a basic concept of what the garment will become. And then towards the end of the garment development process, more detail can be added for visualization purposes, marketing, salesman samples, things like that. Which brings me to number 2. 3D is about data, not just visuals. Simon Kim went so far as to say 3D was never about visuals. A Clo 3D file and a 3D process, when done to maximize value, contains all the information needed to create the garment. Hence the theme of the whole summit this year, which was called the blueprint. Your 3D file is the blueprint for how you create the garment. It can hold the pattern that you use to create the garment from, the avatar that should match the fit of what the garment was made for, the materials that your garment is made of. And then I've started using Closet recently, which enables me to capture communication amongst my team, comments, and all of the development that a garment goes through. So it's far, far more than just a visual of the product. Number 3, good assets matter. Like I said, for number 2, the 3D file contains data. So that data needs to be accurate data. And I would argue especially patterns. In intimate apparel specifically, I've seen so many files where we're not using the actual pattern that makes the garment. We're not using fabrics with appropriate physical properties to drape the garment. And so when we're not using good assets to create our 3D files, then that degrades the value that 3D file can actually bring to the industry. Number 4, use one program deeply. The more you can leverage a single platform like Clo, the simpler and more efficient your workflow becomes. Number 5, 3D doesn't necessarily make development faster, but it does make it more efficient. It reduces waste, it improves communication, and it definitely helps you avoid unnecessary samples and the frustration that comes along with making things that didn't necessarily have to get made through the physical process. And number 6, Clo likes to experiment. They will be developing processes for car seat covers and shoes, which when they announced, I wasn't super interested in. But the justification for that was that when you expand outside of what you already know, you never know what potential you might unlock with experimenting. And so I appreciate that. I know I specialize in intimate apparel specifically, but I often go outside of my comfort zone. Right now, I'm trying to make myself a pair of jeans in Clo just to make sure that I continue to expand my knowledge and my skill set outside of what's already known to me. Because when I do, I often find tools and techniques and tricks that I can apply to intimate apparel, because you never know when something's gonna click. So in the afternoon, I actually got to be part of a panel called Making It as a Digital Fashion Freelancer, along with Laura Sanukt. She has a YouTube channel called Senk Design, and also Layla Nyberg McAllier. So this was a really fun panel because we all do pretty separate things in Chloe. Laura focuses on the visualizations, the animations, the marketing techniques that Chloe can be used for. Layla specifically is focused on pattern making in Chloe 3D. And I specialize in the development of intimate apparel, specifically using Chloe 3D procedures. And the other thing that was really fun about connecting at the user summit was that I got to meet a few other YouTubers that I've been following. I already mentioned Laura from Sank Design. So I got to meet Mikal, who has a channel called 383 Design Studio, and Dorel McPherson, her channel is called The Fashion Tech. So that's always this really surreal experience, meeting these people that you almost kind of feel like you know a little bit already because you've been watching them online so much. And it was the same thing. A few people mentioned to me that they listen to my podcast or watch my YouTube videos, and you kind of feel like you know them a little bit already. So it's really nice to share the same space and breathe the same air. And also, taking this trip to New York is an excellent excuse to meet up with my longtime client, friend, mentor, and all-around incredible human being, Kristen Anderson, who is the owner of Iteration and also Kristen Anderson Swim and Intimates Design Studio. So a lot of the themes from this summit echo what I've been saying and preaching about for the past several years. When I first started learning 3D, I didn't think it was that useful for product development or testing patterns, but the more that I've refined my process to ensure that I'm using the right assets when I'm building my 3D garment, the more that I've proven to myself and to my clients that it's very useful for the development process and for visualization. And it was so validating to see that even the big companies like Gap and Joe Fresh and Hugo Boss kind of came to it from the same place. We're all ending up at the same conclusions. Build your garment early on with few details, refine it as the product matures, and in the end, add details to make a digitally beautiful version of the thing you're trying to make. So that was my experience at the Chloe 3D User Summit in New York 2025. Equal parts fun, validating, and inspiring.